Hey, so I forgot to mention this, but this is going to be spoilers all the way through. I just can't be bothered. I really need to talk about this movie, and you already know that the bomb goes off, so let's just get straight to it. So it's now been a kind of embarrassing 10 days since I saw Oppenheimer, and then I rewatched it about 5 days ago, and ever since I've been trying and failing to construct a video about it. See, the thing with this movie is that it is very dense. There is a lot going on in here, and it's hard to talk about it without either making the video like 20 minutes long, or just making it kind of a jumbled mess of words. But now we're at the point where this is what we're going to work with. If this ends up being a jumbled mess of words, sorry about that, but I do really want to talk about this movie. It is a 3-hour biopic that's making more money than superhero movies, but that's not enough attention. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to change things. I'm Nolan's hero. Speaking of Nolan, I think his style in this movie is just all over. Surprisingly, despite this being the movie about the A-bomb, it's actually not that loud, comparatively to something like Tenet, which was hilariously loud. But loud isn't all you get with Nolan's style. You get so much style all over this movie. One particular thing that he was talking about leading up to the movie was the black and white scenes versus the color scenes, and the way that he was talking about it was kind of confusing. But when you see it in the movie, it's pretty clear that the color scenes are from Oppenheimer's perspective, and the black and white scenes are basically just the Strauss scenes. And this works really well. They use it to its fullest potential. I think my favorite thing they do with it by far is when they redo scenes. You see a scene in color or a scene in black and white, and you have a missing detail or even a detail that you don't know is missing, and then later on it's filled in by the other type of scene. In fact, the Einstein scene that we never get to see is looming throughout the entire movie until we finally get it solved at the end, and I'll talk about that later. Nolan could have just had 2 different worlds that clearly focus on 2 different plots, and that's about it. But he decided to definitely get very creative with it, and I think that that's a really engaging thing. Some people seem to be wondering why audiences are loving this movie so much, because usually they don't really fuck with 3-hour biopics like someone like me would, a loser. And I think it's things like this. You have a simple mystery that isn't solved until the very end of the movie, and the end is so goddamn satisfying. Sure, that ending scene is amazing, but it would not have been as satisfying or as crowd-pleasing if it wasn't for the mystery that's been throughout the whole thing as to, what it even is. It's so plot-relevant, and we don't even know what it is, and so when we find out, that's cool. I just love little moments like that, and I think that the rest of the audience does too. It's just cool. I also think that Nolan nails the incredibly intense scenes. I mean, everyone was going into this thinking, oh, we're going to get to see the bomb blow up, and we do, but it's only a test, which is smart because we're not meant to cut away from Oppie's perspective. But that test bomb scene, I mean, damn, it is real good. Obviously, it looks amazing, most of this movie does, but at the same time, you get this really disturbing feeling in the back of your mind that's accentuated by the breaths that you can hear. You can pretty much only hear people breathing through most of the explosion. And then you get each character's reaction one by one to show how different they are as people. It is so good. And while I do think that one of the weakest moments is right after the bomb test, up to when they learn that the bomb actually went off, whatever. It's kind of clunky to me, but I don't really care that much. It's not huge. But a scene doesn't always need a bomb to be intense, because the ending climax scenes with the trials are terrifying. I mean, I'm sure everyone has seen the screenshot of Roger Robb screaming at Oppenheimer with all the lights blinding everything. It's pretty scary. The climax connecting the black and white scenes and the color scenes in this way where it doesn't actually connect them. They don't merge universes, but we have the trials at the same time where they're both losing. It's so intense. I'll get back to those scenes later, but one thing I do want to talk about is the Oppenheimer speech scene. This scene is horrifying. Everything sort of goes silent at this point, and you get Oppie delivering only a few sentences, and you hear screams from the audience. Some of pure joy and some of genuine horror. Both are equally disturbing. The movie so effectively puts you in Oppie's shoes because he never saw anyone die, and we never saw anyone die, but he knows the reports, and we know the reports, and we know that people died very horrifically. And it haunts him for the rest of the movie. And this scene, while it is very creepy and sad and disturbing, is so important. This really makes us understand why he feels guilty. I mean, like, sure, any of us would feel guilty. We kind of already get why he feels guilty, but this scene, more than any else, gives us a look into his mind and really shapes the character. It is probably hands down the best scene in the entire movie. With those key scenes and direction done, I really want to get to the performances, so I'm going to do that. When it comes to the lead cast, I think the standouts are pretty easily Cillian Murphy as Oppenheimer and RDJ as Louis Strauss. Everyone else in the main cast is great. I think they just don't have as interesting performances, or even just as interesting characters. Like, Matt Damon's performance in this movie is great, but at the same time, he's basically playing a military guy doing his job, and we see 20 years of Oppenheimer's life. So covering Cillian Murphy's performance is kind of difficult because, again, he just does so much. But what I really like is how much he understands the writing and the direction and is able to blend his character with it. For Oppie, the first half of this movie is basically entirely about developing his character for what's gonna happen later. And what Cillian Murphy is doing is basically just that. He is spending pretty much the entire time just becoming this guy. We learn so much about Oppie over the first half of this movie that I really do feel like I'm in his shoes. It's meant to be from his perspective, and Cillian Murphy gives you so much to work with that you really do feel like you're with this guy. And in the second half of this movie, he's just playing like Dead Man Walking. Oppie spends almost the entire back end of the movie just being depressed, and Cillian Murphy's eyes are so good. Eye acting might just be my favorite type of acting because every time that I see a really good eye acting performance, it kind of makes me go crazy. And the fact that the very final shots of the movie outside of the world on fire is focused entirely on Cillian Murphy being able to do a really good eye acting performance is incredibly satisfying. And I know I said that throughout the whole movie we're in his shoes, but really we're seeing it through his eyes. Oppie might have had an overlay of an explosion on his face in that last shot, but really he had an explosion behind his eyes for the entire second half of this movie. It's really something to watch. On the other hand, you have RDJ, who a lot of people said they were excited to see in a real movie again, which I felt like was a bit over the top. And then I watched the movie and yeah, he kinda gets to act his ass off here, and it is really satisfying. I feel that a lot of people didn't care for his early stuff in the movie and just really loved his later stuff, and his later stuff is definitely better, but he's kind of doing the same thing as Oppie by meticulously building his character over these scenes. Plus, I always find it impressive when an actor is playing a character who's playing a character. You know, you see that all the time when an actor is playing a character who is an actor, but this time around, you kind of get an actor playing a character who's faking it the whole time. The Strauss reveal is so damn good because it's one of those twists that is kind of obvious when you go back. Strauss does seem very bitter of Oppenheimer for things that are very simple. But you get something like the isotope scene, which is shown like over and over and over again, and it seems like Oppie is on his high horse after the bomb. He's so famous and important, and that's how Strauss sees it, but we don't know, first of all, that Oppie is absolutely struggling, and we also don't know that Strauss is basically trying to ruin his career over something very simple. The Strauss reveal is effective, but it's also even more effective because we're learning new things about Oppie throughout the movie that we didn't know at the isotope scene. It is perfect. And of course, when it all comes crumbling down, RDJ gets to do this crazy tour de force performance for his monologue about how Oppenheimer is such a piece of shit. In the earlier scenes in the movie, he's so quiet and meticulous, and it seems like he just wants a little bit of attention, but you realize after everything that we've seen that he's obsessive and he's incredibly selfish, and then his aide, who is amazing, just tells him maybe it's not about you. I love twists that sort of recontextualize the entire movie. This mostly just recontextualizes Strauss's entire character, and the funny thing about it is that you could have just looked it up and found out that it happened that way. But seeing it translated to the movies and being written so well and performed so well really makes Strauss feel like such a person. I know this guy. And that is the main string between Oppenheimer and Strauss that makes them so good. Not just because they're like the main characters, but because really they are the ones that I know the most. These are the most real to me as people. I feel like I know these guys. These guys are worthy of so many awards. Now I want to cover the supporting actors, and I have a lot of these, so I'm just going to rapid fire them. First of all, Tom Conti as Einstein and Gary Oldman as Truman. You already got the guy who created the A-bomb on your list, and now you gotta throw in possibly the most famous scientist of all time and the fucking President of the United States. Portraying characters who are just so goddamn famous makes things even more difficult, because I don't know General Groves, but I definitely know these two guys. I love wholesome Einstein who just walks through the woods and sits by the pond, and at the same time, every single scene where he needs to be super important, he is amazing. That incredible final scene would not be the same without him. And then you have Truman, who kind of has this despicable alpha male personality where he's like, tears are for losers. And it's hilarious to learn that that's like really accurate to the actual conversation that they had in real life. And again, having the literal president of the United States in your movie is really difficult, and they did it. This scene makes us understand more about Oppie, it makes us understand everything about Truman, and again, it kind of recontextualizes the entire movie. It is so damn good. Other supporting actors I can run through even faster, watch me. Rami Malek as David Hill has basically only one important scene in the entire movie, and he nails it so hard. The Strauss exposing scene is so damn satisfying, and he matches the vibe beautifully. Then you have David Krumholtz, who's playing Oppie's best friend. Rabbi adds some levity to the movie and also works as a figure to base Oppie's turn off of. The less and less he appears in the movie, the more and more Oppie is going down the wrong path. Alden Ehrenreich as Strauss's aide is honestly kind of funny. For the majority of the movie, he's very professional and supportive of Strauss, and then the second that he learns that he's a shithead, he basically just turns on him immediately and spends the rest of the movie eviscerating him. Every line from him towards Strauss after the big reveal is so damn satisfying because, again, we have another character who just hates Strauss with a burning passion. Jason Clarke as Roger Robb is one I wanted to shout out. The Oppie interrogation scenes might actually be kind of boring if we didn't have a guy who's just going at him so damn hard the entire time. His job there is to be as unfair, aggressive, and dominant as he possibly can be, and he plays that to a T. Finally, I thought that Jefferson Hall as Chevalier was amazing. He's another supporting character that really feels like he's carrying one of the plots. The scene between him and Oppie where he tries to get information out of him to give to the communists is so damn intense. And the fact that we get to see instant results of that when we cut to the interrogation is, again, very engaging. That's the end of my list, and that is close to everything I have to talk about. I know I kind of just talked about the side characters for a while, but I do want to mention one more thing. The damn score. The score of this movie is crazy. It's a very rare move to basically just have the score running throughout the whole thing. The score of this movie, by another difficult name, I think Ludwig Göransson, is just fantastic. Even in some regular, usual scenes of six guys just talking in a room, you'll just have that looming, intense score that is intense. It adds to the intensity. Every part of this movie is kind of building together to be very intense, and one of the most important parts is the score. And that makes scenes like the bomb scenes so much more impactful because you're hearing the score the entire time. You might not even notice it, but you are, and so you're definitely going to notice when it goes away completely and all you hear is breathing. It is beautiful. Plus the score just kind of bangs. Like, I listened to a couple tracks, and it's just good. Okay, that's my very messy Oppenheimer review. I know it's kind of all over the place, there's kind of a lot going on, but this movie has a lot going on. It's got all these different themes and stories. It's got guilt, it's got assumption, it's got envy, it's got risk, it's got power, it's got pressure, it's got a lot. It's kind of an overwhelming watch, sure, but it is one that is so damn worth it. It is easily one of my favorite movies of the year. If I were to give it a score, I would give it a 9.5 out of 10. It was a 9 on the first watch, but then I got the second watch, and that helped me to understand a lot more. And yeah, it's a 9.5. This is crazy. One of my biggest problems with the way that I watch movies personally is that I don't tend to dive into directors that much, but damn, this movie convinced me to check out more Nolan. I mean, like, I've seen the Dark Knight trilogy, I've seen Inception, but I haven't done a deep dive, and now I need to. I have no excuse not to, so that's what I'll be spending probably tomorrow and probably a long time doing. So that's about it, and I'll see you next time. I know that's kind of a basic outro, but I don't really have anything to say. Great movie.